world is evolving at a faster pace than ever before. As we begin the path to recovery after worldwide disruption, this podcast explores how the design industry can adapt to changing expectations and create a better future for your businesses and consumers. I'm your co-host, Peter Marion, and you're listening to Create Tomorrow, the WGSN podcast. The holiday season this year is going to be an incredibly complex one. People are dealing with restrictions on movement and gathering, while really looking to find moments of joy and connection after an incredibly difficult year. According to one survey that covered the US, UK, China, Germany and France, 44% of people reported some decline in income this year, but 82% plan to spend the same or more over the holiday period. So people are really looking for ways of celebrating safely despite all of the challenges and restrictions that we're facing. As people celebrate in smaller groups and connect with each other via video tools, the holiday season this year will be fundamentally different. To explore how people are going to be celebrating this year and how companies will need to adapt, I'm going to be joined by some of my fantastic colleagues. I'll be joined by Jen Creevy, Head of Food and Drink. Hey, Jen.
Hi, Peter.
And I'm also joined by Jenny Middleton, Director of Beauty. Hi, Jenny. How are you?
Hi, Peter. I'm really well, thank you.
And last but not least, I'm joined by Jess Tang, who is a senior consultant based in Hong Kong. Hi, Jess. How are you?
Hi, Peter. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. What are the holidays likely to look like in Hong Kong this year?
Yeah, I'm personally super looking forward to the holidays already, but as one of the key first regions experiencing the virus, so we have so far experienced a few waves or spikes of the cases already. There have been relaxed social distancing measures for the past few months, so we have allowed larger group gatherings and including banquets and celebrations, religious activities. But then we have just gone back to tighter restrictions, unfortunately, the past week because we are entering the fourth wave, so meaning close of bars, nightclubs for at least a week. But looking ahead into the holiday season, it seems like people are going to be a lot more cautious, including myself. But I guess the challenge is to figure out how can we still celebrate while dealing with pandemic fatigue.
And in terms of how people celebrate in Hong Kong, is the celebration largely focused on the Lunar New Year in January?
Yeah, so looking ahead, people are, so in December, in next month, there will be Winter Solstice Festival, which is largely celebrated among the Chinese or in East Asian cultures. So that normally it would represent large family gatherings, dinner gatherings, reunions, where people will go back to their homes to meet their grandparents and parents. But also Christmas, because of, the cultural context in Hong Kong, Christmas is also widely celebrated here as well, but also in other cities in Asia as well. But then looking ahead, it's going to be, I assume that people are going to take a little bit more of a cautious attitude in how they're going to celebrate. And size-wise, in terms of the format and experience, they're expected that there will be it will be changed. It will be shifted onto smaller gatherings and maybe rethinking whether people should host these large family gatherings and so on.
I think because we've had this really challenging year and we've had all of these restrictions around movement and we're going to continue to face these restrictions, there's a real desire, and we're really seeing this in the research that we've been doing, to celebrate and have this really cathartic experience over the Christmas and broader holiday period, as depending on sort of what religion and culture you're in. But what's this likely to look like in terms of the products and experiences that we're going to buy into? Maybe Jen Creevy, you're probably the best person to start talking about this, because when I think about this, I always think about food as kind of the linking thing that we have between our families.
Yeah, absolutely, Peter. So I think we're already getting used to the quieter celebrations. So in this lockdown that we're just in at the moment in the UK, we've just had Diwali, for example, which was much quieter. Earlier in the year, we had Eid, which was also in another lockdown. So we're definitely getting used to these smaller, quieter celebrations. And brands and retailers have had a little bit of time to prepare for the Christmas holidays. They weren't caught off guard like they were in March. So we will see for some of these celebrations much smaller portions. So for Christmas, for example, we'll have smaller turkeys, maybe just a turkey crown, smaller sort of packs for two or even families of four, as opposed to the big celebrations. We'll also see lots of pre-prepared meals and no fuss dishes, because after the year we've had, nobody wants a stressful Christmas in the kitchen. So we'll be seeing a lot of that. And then also, I think really excitingly, we've also seen the explosion of restaurant at home meals throughout the various lockdowns. So lots of those restaurants are now doing Christmas meal kits, which I think is really, really exciting for people. We've already seen, for example, on our social media tracking that in the US, we've seen Thanksgiving meal kits being tracked over social media. So that's clearly something that people are looking for. You know, it's the ultimate no fuss dish, really, isn't it? So you can have a restaurant style meal without any fuss. So I think that's perfect for the celebrations. And then a couple of other things. One other thing I would say is in terms of food, people are still looking for special, affordable luxuries, really. So it is a time to celebrate. But of course, it's been a very difficult year. So a lot of people are facing challenges around affordability and value, of course. So brands have really pulled out all the stops to make sure people can still celebrate. So just one example, we're seeing lots of products that are flavoured with synthetic truffle. So you get the flavour of truffle, but without the price. So people will still be looking for those little affordable luxuries to celebrate with their households this year.
Yeah, and I think that idea of the stress-free meals really resonates, because it's that idea of everyone has been so anxious and stressed out over the course of the year. In terms of how that will translate to somewhere like beauty, Jenny, what's that going to look like in terms of gifting? Is it really going to be about those sorts of gifts that help to, make us feel more relaxed, or how is that going to turn out from the beauty sector?
Well, I think one of the most interesting things is that we all talked about in our introductions about how we'd be spending less time with people that we usually do at this time of year. And I think what beauty can do, and what we've been seeing and tracking over the past few months, is that beauty can step in and replicate some of the sensations and feelings and experiences of being with the people we love and the places we love, even when we physically can't be. So we've seen a lot of beauty products coming out that replicate that sense of touch, that sensation of touch that we're all missing. We're all living in a touch famine at the moment. So beauty tools like brushes or little sensorial applicators that bring warmth or replicate human touch, they're going to become really popular. And lots of gift sets that include beauty tools or sensorial textures of product will become important. But also fragrance has become really important during the last few months, because it has this ability through the aroma to remind us of those people that we don't have physically in our homes and in our lives at the moment. So Homesick have brought out this lovely candle, which is like Grandma's Kitchen. Anecdote have got one called Granddad's Cardigan. Babe, the drinks company in the US, they've linked up with Candia, and they've done this range of candles that remind you of live stadium sports gigs. So there's like one's called $18 nachos, and there's another one that's ironically called Jockstrap. So there's lots of fragrances that are replicating the sense, the aroma of coffee shops and libraries and bookstores, and things that are reminding us of just the places we want to be at that we can't be at. So I think the aroma and the texture of beauty products is going to be really dialed up. Whereas normally we'd be thinking about buying beauty products at this time of the year for Christmas parties. Now we're going to be thinking much more about it for self-care. And you're right, some of that is stress relief and treating ourselves, because we need to make an occasion of this, right? And we need it to be a joyful occasion as much as we can, but a safe one. And some of it is around just kind of finding a different role for beauty beyond the aesthetic. And that's what it's really done during this pandemic.
And I think one of the other things that I keep thinking about is obviously the gift set and, the sort of fragrance gift set that you get at the department stores and I guess at the sort of large drugstore chains. Are they likely to be as popular this year, or is it going to change as a result of people not necessarily celebrating in the same way?
Well, what we've seen during the pandemic is that it's obviously very hard to discover fragrances. So, the beauty hall hasn't been operating in the same way. So we've seen people buying their beauty staples, not in the luxury boutiques and the beauty halls of department stores, but online or in supermarkets. So what that's meant is we've seen an uptick in fragrances that you don't need to smell to know what they're like. So more lavender, more peony, more rose, for example. And of course, as well as that, they're also very nostalgic fragrances. So they're enabling us to sort of, take us back to a more comforting time when we weren't living with this pandemic. So that has an impact in terms of nostalgia, and we'll definitely see, an uptick in terms of things like cinnamon, cloves, and those kind of fragrances, not just from the lovely food that Jen Creevy was describing earlier, but also in the candles and the body creams and the lotions we'll be buying. But also, I think gifting is going to be different this year because people have got to find new reasons to buy certain beauty categories. And what we've seen from brands is some real innovation around how they're incentivizing people to buy. So, for example, in the early part of this pandemic, we were talking a lot about the Jimmy Choo lipstick, which uses Iris Crush, the scent, in the lipstick. Kilian did a similar thing. And that fragrance is only going to be smelt by the wearer. But it's about giving you another reason to buy a lipstick, another reason to choose colour cosmetics. And as we've gone through this period and into the sort of more Thanksgiving in the US or Christmas over here, in Europe, we've seen kind of brands like Thrive Cosmetics, for example, who've brought out a pumpkin spice latte version of its lipstick. And Espresso have got a lipstick that smells like coffee. So finding other reasons to buy. I mean, Tom Ford's famous one is about the fact that it has the most reassuring click of a lipstick bullet. It just feels lovely when you click it together. There have just got to be other reasons to buy cosmetics if we're not going out to parties. And brands are really innovating and finding those reasons to encourage people to want to buy them. So I think we will continue to buy beauty, but it will just look a little bit different.
In terms of what's happening in Asia, to just sort of shift the focus for a second, Jess, can you give us a little bit more depth in what's happening in terms of how people have been celebrating? Obviously, Diwali has just passed, so maybe you've got a little bit more of a sense of how the broader sort of celebratory period has been going.
So 2 weeks ago, it was Diwali, and reality is a lot of people who live overseas have not been able to fly home for the celebration. While in India, the authorities have enforced pretty strict protocols, including mandatory face masks and social distancing policies in public spaces. But these are actually quite tough to implement, in reality because of all the coronavirus stress, anxiety, and fatigue people are experiencing. Essentially, for important festivals like Diwali or the Eid or even the upcoming Lunar New Year festival, these types of festivals are literally a ray of light in the darkness. So, but as seen on social media and also our verified by our local network, people continue to socialize. They continue to go to ceremonies. They continue to do family gatherings. I would say intergenerational family gatherings are still quite core in these festival celebrations, especially in countries with large populations like India, China, and especially for those who live in multi-generational homes or those who have family in the same country or city. But looking ahead into the future, the size, scale, format of these gatherings will probably be redefined. So, for example, instead of 50 family members all in the same room, let's do 10, 12, right? Instead of going out for a big festive 12-course meal, let's stay home for an intimate hot pot potluck, or there will be plans for multiple smaller scale gatherings instead of one big gathering for everyone, or there will be new motivation to celebrate with different groups and clusters of friends and family, and people may even choose to celebrate earlier or later to avoid the crowd. So I expect these kinds of attitudes and behaviors to continue in the upcoming key festivals, Winter Solstice or Dongzhi in Chinese next month, or Lunar New Year upcoming in 2021.
And I mean, that idea of the smaller gatherings and celebrating early is something that we've really been picking up across all of, even in the West as well. I mean, it's something that I wrote about in a report that's just come out about people. One of the memes I saw was really about the Mariah Carey Christmas album starting to track up in terms of social media trends back in October, which made me laugh so much. But it's always funny when you start to see the inspiration for some of these things or some of the data points. But in terms of like Lunar New Year and how that's likely to be celebrated, obviously it's looking ahead, and it's quite challenging to be looking ahead at the moment. But what's that likely to look like? Because obviously that's a huge celebration in Asia, and it's a really important one. So how is that likely to be different in terms of behaviors and spending patterns and things like that?
Yeah, a few months down the line, Lunar New Year in 2021, it will be in February, but with the on and off, unpredictable spike of coronavirus cases, home celebrations will continue to be important in Asia. So Lunar New Year celebrations in East and Southeast Asia will probably see a drive in demand for gifts or services to spice up the home experience. So, and again, addressing the need for positivity and the festive spirit, people will probably splurge a little bit, pamper themselves or loved ones at home, or even make up for the not so normal festival experience. So say, for example, recently in Korea for the Chuseok festival, so that's Korea's Thanksgiving, Hyundai, the department store, they have seen the rise in sales of premium Korean beef sets. So that the sales has more than tripled compared to last year, as a lot of people have canceled trip, but instead bought really nice gifts for their family members or for themselves to celebrate the festival in favor of staying socially distancing. But then there's another extreme here in Asia, verified from our local network in Thailand. A segment of customers have actually continued to planning parties, planning to socialize for the upcoming festivals, and as if the coronavirus does not exist. So some people are adopting kind of a more hedonistic approach in face of the pandemic at the same time. So essentially, there's no one type of behavior that could define how people would react during the holiday season, but it all depends on specific customer types in Asia.
As this year has been incredibly difficult for so many people, and retailers and brands have really shown up in the first part of the pandemic, they pivoted to making hand sanitizer, they pivoted to making PPE and all that sort of stuff. And obviously, the challenges that people are facing are continuing, particularly around food poverty and things like that. And I was just wondering, where do you see this sort of corporate purpose and charitable giving looking like into the holiday period and into 2021?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Peter. So we obviously did see a real focus on the community throughout the earlier lockdown and continued, which, it's a great thing, really. We obviously saw lots more deliveries to food banks, people helping out their neighbours, food deliveries. Lots of the restaurants, even though they've had an incredibly tough year, have been providing food for school children, for example, or for the elderly that can't leave their houses. So it has been a real sense of community around the globe, which has been amazing. Even things like just having a drink with a neighbour stood outside on the street. We've seen lots of those examples. So brands are really focusing on this and focusing on the local community. So, for example, around the celebrations, I'm seeing a lot of people saying, I'm only going to buy locally this year for my Christmas presents, for example. So I think those brands that will win out in this occasion will really focus on the mission. And so whether it's, charitable giving, part of their corporate social responsibility, or whether it is a local brand just showing what they can do, whether it's using local farms to make the produce or tying in with charities. I think it's going to be really important this year.
We've also been talking about this, I think, in beauty as well. Leveraging the local has been a really big trend for us that we were talking about before the pandemic. But hygiene poverty has really been in the media spotlight as we've gone through this pandemic, and we've realised the importance of kind of, personal care and hygiene. And we've seen, as you were saying, Peter, a lot of product houses in beauty pivoting to produce much needed hand sanitizer and soap during the beginning of this pandemic, but also donating those products through beauty banks and other charitable donation schemes to make sure that families can not only be fed, but also be clean and therefore safe. So that cause-driven beauty is something we've been talking about for some time, but consumers want to buy from brands that do actually leave the world in a better place. And we will see those kind of messages and that kind of reset of brand priorities continuing to permeate in all sectors, but definitely, as Jen was saying, in food and definitely in my sector in beauty, we're seeing that come through strongly already.
As we're facing really different circumstances this year, I mean, Jen, you sort of talked about this a little bit earlier, the idea of challenged incomes and looking for a luxury at sort of different price points. But then I guess there's a flip side around that, which is that for a lot of us the lucky ones among us who haven't had our incomes challenged over this period, we haven't been going out for dinners, we haven't been going on holiday, we haven't necessarily been spending on fashion. And so there's ultimately a little bit more money potentially saved up, and obviously we're really wanting to spend and celebrate. So what's that likely to look like in terms of spending for the people that haven't necessarily have been negatively impacted financially over the course of this year?
Yeah, so I think you're right, Peter. People do want to celebrate during the festivities, but I think it still will be moderated because we've had a very, very difficult year. So I think one of the things that we're seeing, we'll always have the more hedonistic, as Jess said, who will want to go to the restaurants as soon as they open and want to, buy the sort of expensive food and drinks. However, for the majority of people, I think this year has shown a real joy of the small things in life. So whether that is, simply taking a walk in the countryside or a walk on the beach so in terms of food, I think we're seeing real trends around that. So, for example, baking kits that people have at home, or whether they might do them with their kids, or even a baking class that you do over Zoom. So, I did one with my son and then one of his friends in their house, and we did a pasta making class together. So it's those small things that I think people will be looking for this year. So that could be novelty foods or even advent calendars. Or things like, we've seen small bottles of gin for baubles on your Christmas tree. I think people will really be taking joy in those small things around the celebrations, rather than sort of splashing out too hedonistically.
I think I'm just going to kind of go back to something that Jen was talking about, this idea of pivoting back towards video, and that idea of, I think one of the things that we're really seeing at the moment is this sense of Zoom fatigue. I mean, as colleagues, I'm sure we've all been spending, I think I spent something like 6 hours on video conferences yesterday, on video meetings. And obviously, as we're moving into, we're continuing through these lockdown periods and things like that, and we're going to have to be celebrating. I mean, my family is in Australia. All of my Christmas this year is going to be done via video conferencing, but it gets to a point where you kind of like, okay, I can't do another family quiz, and if I keep staring at my computer drinking wine, I'm probably going to get really depressed. So in terms of that shift, I guess, around the video conferencing, should brands and businesses be doing what you were sort of talking about a little bit earlier, Jen, shifting towards those sorts of classes as a means of creating connection and building relationships over the holiday period?
So I think it's I think what you said earlier in terms of you have to be strategic with these things because, as most adults are spending their entire day on video calls, if you're working from home, it's not what you want to do in the evenings or at the weekends. You're absolutely right. But I think it's creating those moments. So if you're getting kids involved, it might be, like I said, a baking class, or even if it's for an adult, obviously lots of the chefs are now doing Instagram videos where you can follow them with your meal kits to create your Michelin star dish at home. So it's kind of short, sharp, strategic, meaningful moments that I think brands should focus on, and something where you can get more than one person involved. So you don't have to be sat there right in front of the screen. You can be moving around your kitchen, cooking, those sorts of things. So we want to be active after we've sat at our desks all day. But I think it can really create a sense of connection. And we are all, as Jenny said, we are all craving that connection right now. So I think it's being really strategic about what you're doing, and creating the small moments, but not having people sat there just in front of a screen.
And one of the things, Jenny, you and I have talked about a little bit so far this year, and I know that you're quite excited to be discussing on this podcast. As a result of many of the restrictions, there are different members of the family that are likely to be getting more gifts this year. So tell us about that. Who is going to be getting gifts this year that might not necessarily have been getting gifts last year?
So obviously we've seen pet ownership spike during the lockdowns. Our pet companions have helped us with that touch famine I was talking about earlier. And we've done a number of reports on this on WGSN Beauty, because one of the things that we know that consumers spend money on during a recession is their children and their pets. And lots of people have become pet parents during this period. And new pet owners really, who spent a lot of money, some of them, getting, beautiful cockapoos or whatever, they have decided that
they're very expensive at the moment, Jen. They're very, very expensive.
They are very expensive, but if you've spent that money, getting your pampered pooch, you want to pamper them. So the people who've spent money on buying dogs will be spending money on beauty products for the dog, or the cat, or whatever other animal you've got. But predominantly, what we've seen here is that a real shift from sort of cat nippers or very kind of functional doggy shampoo. We're seeing here companies producing luxury gift sets so that you would use them as a pet parent with your pet. So whatever product you can think of from a wellness or beauty perspective that you'd use on a human being, you can now get for your cat or dog. So this is a real opportunity for beauty brands to think about extending their portfolios. And we've seen some really clever brand innovations. And the idea is that you have the experience, the meaningful experience, as Jen was saying earlier, but you just have it with your pet, and you basically create a little spa experience. So, we've got some amazingly cute pictures on our site, and I know that most of the team at WGSN have been enjoying looking at those, but these are really expensive. We're talking about, stuff worth hundreds of dollars. So this is a real opportunity for beauty brands and also for pet brands to think about extending into this different area, because that is creating a connection between pet and pet parent that is going to really define, I think, 2020 and 2021.
Gosh, I can't wait to see some of these collaborations that are likely to come through off the back of this. It's going to be very exciting. And I also can't wait to get my own pet at some point so that I can start buying into this. But we're running out of time. So as always, we ask, what's the one thing that brands should be doing in the immediate term and in the longer term to respond to these shifts around celebration? Jenny, do you want to go first?
Yes, so I think in the short term, it's really important to do what Jen was saying earlier and build connection. During the original lockdown, we saw a lot of brands allowing consumers to have a sort of intimate look behind the scenes at the people who were creating brands. So we saw hairdressers, makeup artists, nail technicians doing the sorts of things that Jen was saying about chefs, and actually inviting people into their homes and showing them how to achieve that perfect blow dry or amazing looking manicure. So keeping that connection going. You know, consumers have got used to that level of intimacy and holding back the curtain and sort of seeing behind the scenes on how products are made or how they should be used. That's going to become really important. That's a really sort of sticky behavior. And then in the longer term, medium to longer term, you know, what's really important here is to think about consumers' needs in beauty. So we all talked about being on video calls during this podcast. And of course, we know that that's going to be a continuing feature of our lives. Even after we've got a vaccine, our work lives have shifted dramatically. And that means that consumers are going to want product that works. So products with blue light filter protection, product that enables you to look really good and groomed on camera so that you look the part. And in an uncertain job market, people are going to want to make sure that they look good when they see their boss on a meeting, that they look groomed, they look engaged. So, you know, defining kind of, you know, what kind of color cosmetics those people might want is going to become really important for brands, and thinking about how to help them with product that makes them look good and professional, but also then helping them, you know, make sure that their days are punctuated by a change of pace. And as I've said, beauty can really help you do that. And I think we'll see some really inventive ways of bringing the outside in. So there's some beautiful, Alpina have got this amazing kind of fragrance that enables you to think about being transported and going skiing. So for lots of people, we'll see kind of beaches and winter holidays brought into their homes. And it's thinking about what can beauty do to kind of replicate what we're missing. And it's already started doing that really well. And brands need to continue to think about that for the next few months. And longer term, really think about how our beauty regimes will change. More leave on, more leave in products as we've got more flexibility around the way that we work.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And what about you, Jess?
In the short term, as the festive season approaches, consumers will desire deeper connections with people, friends, and family. They want to engage and celebrate with people they love and care about. So brands should engage to help customers feel connected and build meaningful connections despite the challenging times. Addressing the need for joy and positivity in a not-so-normal festive season, in the long run, brands have a role in finding ways to rebuild hope and foster an optimistic spirit. Brands should explore entertaining and pampering experiences that would make up for canceled trips or gatherings.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And what about you, Jen?
So I think a few things here for the food industry. So one of the things to come out of this challenging year is the fact that people are thinking about where their food comes from a lot more. And, you know, I think the issue of sustainability will come back with a real punch early next year. So consumers will want to know, you know, where their food has come from, what the brand is doing for the environment, that they're buying from. So I think, you know, brands are already doing a great job of this, but those real mission-driven messages will be really, really important, whether it's around the packaging or the actual food product itself. So I think that will be key going into next year. And also, as Jenny said, self-care will be really, really important considering the challenging year we'll have and will continue to face into next year. So issues around immunity and health will really, really spike come January following all of these celebrations. So brands, again, health has always been huge for food and drink, but it will just become more and more important as we go into the year where people want each part of their day to be balanced. So, eat, their breakfast, their lunch, their dinner, snacks, they will want them all to be supporting this sort of health and well-being. So that will be really, really important. And then just lastly, we've mentioned it before, but it is very, very important that brands focus on value going into next year. This has been really, really tough economically for a lot of people around the world. So, we can't get away from that. And I think, they're already doing a great job and they'll continue to do a great job, but they really need to innovate around value because it has been a very challenging year.
And that's all we have time for today. Thanks for listening to the WGSN podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard, then please subscribe to us. You can find us on all major podcast platforms. And if you really like what you heard, then please leave us a rating and review. It really does help us get the word out there. Next week will be a special episode where the spotlight is turned on WGSN as Essential Chief Content Officer David Davies interviews Carla Basashi about the challenges, changes and triumphs WGSN has faced in 2020. But in the interim, if you want to learn more about what we've been talking about today, then head over to WGSN.com to find out how you can get access to much more insight and analysis. If you're already a WGSN subscriber, head over to the site where we've pulled together some of our research on celebrating and the holidays with the key points from this podcast in one handy report. Thanks to our guests for being here, and I'd also like to thank our show producers, Roland Boddenham and Bethan Ryder. And again, thank you for being here. Please stay well and healthy, and we'll see you next time. Bye.